Hi there, I'm Claire Williams from the British Equestrian Trade Association. Welcome to today's episode, which is part of BETA's Summer of Safety. During the summer, we're talking about all things equine and rider safety, from body protectors and hats through tech, biosecurity, yard safety, feed and equine health. Today, we're talking about hoof care and the best way of working with your farrier. Joining me tonight is Mark Aiken. He's a full-time farrier and started out in the racing industry before starting his apprenticeship in farriery. He went on to complete a BSc in farriery sciences and still works today with horses competing at all levels, including international in most of the FEI disciplines. He's worked overseas and around the world, as well as writing articles on farriery for titles both in the UK and overseas. So I'm delighted to have Mark join me. Good evening, Mark. How are you?
Good. Thanks for inviting me. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can. Thank goodness. Nice to have you on board. Have you caught up with any of the results from today? Olympics-wise?
Well. Really,
didn't we?
Yeah. Results.
Another.
Got quite a few of my friends that are working out there as farriers out in Tokyo.
Lucky.
So no, it's good. Fantastic. Yeah, very lucky. Very lucky.
A good gig to get. I know a vet who's out there as well. Sounds great.
Yeah.
Have you ever done any overseas work like that? Any of the
Not of any of the events like that. No, I've helped out the American team at Burley a few years back, and that's been about it really with the eventing. Yeah, I mean I've worked with quite a few individuals overseas, but I suppose Burley with the American team that was several years ago now. Yeah, that's fantastic.
Brilliant opportunity. Yeah, brilliant opportunity. So how long have you been a farrier?
I started my apprenticeship in 1988 after I worked in Southern Ireland. I got family out there that were involved in racing. So I worked out there for 2 or 3 years. And I wanted something. I was basically looking for a job that would allow me to continue to work with horses, but also I could work anywhere in the world. And obviously the farriers were coming to the yard, several times a week. And I don't know, just one of those days, a little light bulb moment. It was a epiphany, and I thought I want to be a farrier, and had no idea how to start an apprenticeship or anything like that. So I investigated how to become a farrier. It's a 5-year apprenticeship just to get your basic diploma. And there's other avenues to get higher qualifications. So I commenced my apprenticeship, and I graduated in '93. And during my apprenticeship, I was very fortunate enough to be able to travel as well. So I mean, that really did open my eyes up an awful lot to farriery and also what goes on around the world. I went over to worked out in the States 3 or 4 times during my apprenticeship. So yeah, I had a fantastic apprenticeship and learned an awful lot. Very privileged. I still speak to my old boss.
Oh, brilliant. I mean, because we never take our farriers for granted because they are so integral to our horse care. But your vet and your farrier are absolutely essential. But it's not the easiest of jobs, is it? Because never mind the owners, you've got to deal with the horses as well.
Yeah, it's a very, very physically demanding job, and also the skill involved as well. Understanding anatomy and biomechanics. I mean, education from a farrier perspective has really come along in leaps and bounds, certainly the last 20 or 30 years. And I think, British farriers are, they are the best. They are the best in the world. They have the best training, and they are recognised as so. And I think a lot of horse owners do take the farrier for granted in this country, but it's only when you go and see shoeing farrier in other parts of the world, again, that is a real eye opener. I mean, I've worked with indigenous farriers in Romania and in India, and you see what goes on there. You see what the suffering that horses have to endure in those countries. And you come back here. I mean, it's just it's like night and day between the two. So I think British horse owners and British horses are very fortunate
Yeah,
which
in
makes
many
it
respects. Yeah,
yeah
I've seen how horses are kept in some other countries, and I always come back and tell mine, just be very lucky.
yeah
I think you're
lucky,
right.
lucky.
It, as an owner, we don't appreciate the training you go through. I didn't even know you could do a degree in farriery science. And I think you see a farrier turn up on your yard without really understanding the work that you go
Yeah,
through to get there. And it is a very physically demanding job. And I know that you've done some research through the BFBA in terms of injuries that
yeah.
farriers get. And I was amazed, something like 76% of farriers have injuries, at least one injury that results in a hospital visit.
Yeah.
And it's scary because that affects your livelihood.
It is. I mean, the survey was carried out by BFBA earlier on this year. And I think for a long time, there's always been like sort of, a lot of anecdotal thoughts about injuries in farriery and, how long is a farrier's career? How many injuries are you gonna endure? I mean, one of the farriers I worked with out in America, he had a multi-farrier practice, and he reckoned that on average, a farrier would probably have a serious injury every 5 years. But again, it was very, very anecdotal. But when you look in, as a result of the survey that was done, when you think that 38% of farriers who've had an injury, that has been a lasting impairment for the rest of their career. I mean, it's a massive number. I'm trying to think what it is now with how many of those. Yeah, I mean, 21% of farriers that have had an injury have been off work for over 4 weeks. So yeah, the statistics are quite astounding, really. I'm talking about the survey. I mean, approximately 10% of registered farriers took part in this survey, and I understand that that's a decent amount to give you some good strong data back from there. So no, it did up some quite frightening results, really. And I don't think that this survey's been done. I don't think it's been replicated anywhere else in the world. I mean, I spoke with a colleague of mine who's an editor of the American Farriers Journal in the States, and he was unaware of any survey that had been done in this depth. So I think it threw up some really interesting, but quite frightening data as well.
Well, it is because it's your livelihood. And I mean, have you had a serious accident yourself?
I've had numerous. My left. I've had two very bad kicks to my left knee, which is kind of, now I'm getting old. It's sort of give me a bit of jip. I've had quite a few kicks to the head. I've had quite a few black eyes. I mean, one occasion I went to pick my children up when they're small from school with two massive black eyes. I mean, I shouldn't even probably been driving, and they're absolutely saw me just burst into tears. But that was probably my worst accident. That was 2011. And that kind of, always kind of aware of accidents, and then, being a farrier, speaking with other farriers, and, you go to conferences and you kind of share war stories and all the rest of it. And there's some pretty weird ways that one can have an accident as a farrier. But yeah, losing my finger was a real wake up call, and it kind of made me more aware of how dangerous our job is.
Yeah.
And it kind of made me want to kind of educate farriers and horse owners as well as to the accidents that can happen. And I'm sure, I mean, as farriers, we talk amongst ourselves, and when we see some of the dangerous predicaments that horse owners put them in completely unnecessarily. And I mean, like, people in leading horses in flip flops, people like leading two horses at once, and things like that. People do things to try and save themselves time, and obviously, we're all mindful about trying to get things done quickly, efficiently. But the flip side of that is, if you're going to cut corners, then you are going to get hurt, and saving 5 minutes is going to be just pale into comparison if you have a lifelong injury or a disability, or heaven forbid, something far more serious than that. So I'm quite passionate about it.
Well, it's your livelihood as well.
I mean,
It's interesting.
It is. And I mean, when I had my accident, I mean, it was I mean, looking back, it probably couldn't have been done any safer, really. I think it was like a 4 or 5 year old gelding who I'd trimmed its feet since it was a foal, never had any issues with it, previously. It was at the end of the day, I may have been a little bit tired, and we all do, when we're doing something repetitively, we probably all do get a little bit complacent. And I was showing I was trimming it as barefoot on a level concrete yard. The client was holding it, and I was trimming up a back foot, and no idea, but for whatever reason, this horse spooked, and it kicked out very, very hard down to the ground. I lost my balance. My hand went underneath the foot. To make matters worse, it then picked up its other back foot and kind of like twisted round on my hand, doing that sort of like stubbing out a cigarette kind of thing. And it was just it didn't hurt. It was just like numb. But when I picked my hand up and my finger was hanging down the back, and the two fingers beside it were a bit mangled as well. When I held my hand up, it's literally like someone had got a stick of seaside rock and done that. I was like looking down into my marrow of my finger. And I just thought this wave of nausea went over me. And I said a few choice words. And the other time, calm down, what's happened? And I was my little dumpy finger up and like, your naughty horse has just done this to me, and kind of drained slightly from her face, and then and I can't remember too. I went into a bit of shock and stuff. I was. I'm not embarrassed. I did cry. Not embarrassed to say it. I couldn't. By the time the ambulance came to me, I couldn't remember my name, my date of birth, nothing. I just got in a complete state of shock, and I thought I'm never going to shoe another horse again. So that was it, and I was in hospital for. They tried to reattach the finger, but I mean it was just beyond being saved. So I was in hospital for 2 weeks. They finally, having reattached it, I pleaded with them, and it was removed, was amputated. I was off work, I think, for about another 10 weeks, and then came back into work. And it doesn't bother me. There's certain things it does bother me. But 99% of things, life just carries on as all, really. But it just made me think it could have been worse.
It could have been. I mean, it's interesting because the survey also said that could have been avoided, and a third of them say no, it was unavoidable. However, that means that potentially the rest is avoidable. But somebody just put out, how do you risk assess that? I mean, that is it. I suppose what we need to think about is how can we as owners make it safer for you, our farriers. So, and that's really what we're talking about, is how do we reduce the risk for all of us? Because if a horse is going to be naughty with you, the likelihood is they're being naughty for the owner. And we shouldn't, as owners, expect our farriers to educate our horses to pick their feet up and be polite when they're being shod. So,
I think a lot of it comes down to farriers like educating their clients on on what is safe and what is acceptable. I think horse ownership, has changed a lot. A lot of riding schools have closed down. So I think you get a lot of people that buy a horse, and then once they bought the horse, then they learn to look after it. And I think a lot of the time their education comes from other people that may be on that yard. And so it's not, there's a lot of shortcomings to that, but there's shortcomings from farriers as well, telling the horse owners how to do, how to manage the situation, safely, how not taking shortcuts, how to make it the most safe environment for for the farrier, for the horse owner, and primarily for the horse. That's what we're doing. Our role is doing our best for the horse.
So in specific terms, because Claire asks, what can we do to make it safer? So, when should you start preparing for your farrier's visit?
Well, I think it goes back to when the horse is born as a foal. I mean, I've come across it, and I know many other farriers have come across situations where you're presented with like a 16-3-year-old colt that's had no handling. And it's like, can you trim it, or can you put some shoes on it? It may, some of the horses have never had their feet trimmed before. So as a foal, it's imperative to kind of imprint it on the foal that people aren't horrible, they're not going to hurt it, and just getting it acclimatized to having its feet picked up. It's probably beneficial to have, especially with young horses, to have an assistant. So an owner of a foal, it's helpful to have someone to hold the mare for a start, or for someone to hold the foal to get used to having its feet picked out. Because obviously foals, they're very, very juvenile. They're developing, they're finding their way, and they're not used to. They find it difficult balancing on 4 feet, never mind 3 feet. But it's just gently just picking their feet out, and I probably recommend doing that. To start with, doing it in a stable environment, because you don't want, when I say stable environment, I mean literally the stable. So if a horse should overreact, because the worst thing is when you get foals can lose it when they've got a foot picked up, and they can flip over backwards or go on the side. You don't want the horse falling on the concrete. So it's doing that in a safe environment within the stable. Sometimes foals find some security by being against a wall if they need to lean against the wall, and also I find it quite useful trimming foals in a stable somewhere. You can maybe the owner can hold the horse and maybe have the foal's head in a corner and have its body alongside the wall, and then the farrier will be working on
support,
the side, not against the wall. So the foal has the security of of being near a wall, obviously near mum if it's still a juvenile, and just having that security. Trying to trim a horse in an open, or trim a foal in an open environment is can be quite dangerous, and they'll try and get away from you because they're not sure. They're immature, they don't know what's going on. I mean, I have so many times can you trim the foal in the field? The mum's out there, and invariably probably a couple of other brood mares out there as well. And when we're as farriers, we're looking at, especially with young horses, that their growth plates haven't finished, nowhere they finished sealing, so they're still growing, they're still maturing, their legs are becoming longer. To assess a foal from in front, from the side, and from behind, if it's not standing on level ground, then you haven't got hope. You are just going on luck as to whether or not you can trim that foal accordingly. And if you trim the limb, out of balance, it doesn't take very long for a foal to develop a limb imbalance or a deformity, because you've not been able to trim it properly, because you can't. The first thing you're using is your eyes to assess that horse. If it's not standing on a level surface, you're not going to be able to assess it. And again, it's difficult trying to trim a foal in an open area, because invariably they want to get away from the farrier guy trying to pick his feet up. So
a bit like the vet as well. And is it true? So when you're picking young horses' feet up, that you should knock them, say with the end of your hoof pick, just to get them used to that feel.
Yeah, just getting. I mean, to start with, you don't be holding a foal's foot up for 5-10 minutes or what have you. Literally for 5 seconds with a hoof pick, and then just very, very lightly just tap round the hoof, and just work your way around the hoof. Again, it's incredibly boring, but that repeatability of picking the foal's feet up it'll pay massive dividends when the horse becomes mature for everybody. And also, I've gone off track now. No, it's gone. Foal's gone.
No, tapping the foot. And somebody else has asked.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, I was going to say, and it helps if you start, whichever way you do it. If you want to do, some people do the front feet and then the hind feet, or work their way around. It's good just to maintain, just keep that repeatable. Do exactly the same routine with it.
And I have to say, I don't know whether it helps, but I've taught mine to lift her feet up on command.
It does help to say it as you know.
It makes the farrier's life easy. Have you ever had to refuse? What do you do when you're faced with a horse where you think this one's dangerous? Have you ever refused to shoe a horse?
I have, yeah. I mean, for the horse, I mean, it's no fun for the horse either. You know, if you're trying to show or show a horse that's reacting badly to you trying to do that, then you kind of you're setting yourself up to fail. If you have a big fight and a big battle with the horse, it's not going to be any better the next time you come back to it. I mean, you can certainly be, you can be firm but not cruel, but you can be firm with it and try and hold its leg and try and with your voice reassure it and just take your time. Obviously, with the full limb, you run your hand on its up to its wither, down through the shoulder, and take your time and reassure it in that way. I mean, the majority of horses, they adapt and they accept shoeing as just part of their routine as much as being groomed or what have you. And you do get horses that sadly that they'll never accept being shod, and they do have to be sedated. I mean, it's easier these days with like dermacetin and gel to have that prescribed by the vet to help you sedate a horse, because it's again it's difficult. You've got the element of cost of having a vet to do an IV sedation, and then try and marry up the time with your vet being there at the same time as your farrier. I mean, that can be complex if the vet can get called out on an emergency with a colic or something like that, which will prioritise sedation. Or again, if you've got if the farrier is running late, so the dermacetin gel's great. It doesn't suit all horses. I've got some horses on my book that have to have an IV. We've tried the dermacetin gel, it hasn't touched it, and we have to go with sadly have to go with the IV. Sedation. It's the only way that some of these horses you can get done safely.
It's amazing because I'd never really, because my horses are, my farrier will probably tell me I'm a liar, but I think they're good for my farrier. I have to get, I use a dermacetin gel for one of my girls for the dentist, but it would never have occurred to me that I would need to sedate my horse for the farrier. What proportion? And how many people actually, when you say they need sedation for their horse, do you get people who just refuse?
In what I've never had, I don't think I've ever had anyone ring me up and say, "Can you shoe my horse? By the way, it needs to be sedated." I've never had that happen. But then conversely, I have had clients whose horses have needed sedation because they are dangerous. I've had horses that have had 3 or 4 farriers who've had it sedated, and then they kind of think, "Oh yeah, little Bobby doesn't. I'm sure he'll be fine." And they've approached other farriers without mentioning the fact that their horse does need to be sedated, which is quite from a liability point of view. People can be, and again, likewise with farrier, there's plenty of people that do sue, whether it's owners or farriers these days. I mean, part of that, going back to this, when I had my accident, I had a couple of insurances that I did claim on. I mean, I think I paid something like that getting on for £60,000 I paid into these 2 insurances, and for the time that I had off, I mean, I think I got, from the insurance point of view, I think I only got about £2,000 paid out to me. And again, that was done retrospectively, so I had to wait 8 weeks till I got any sort of payouts at all. So from farriers that have got health, this is one of the things we brought up in the survey, that over 71% of those farriers have got health insurance and critical illness insurance, but 90% of those didn't make a claim on that insurance, which is an interesting statistic. But I don't know, when I went through, one of my concerns when I had my accident and going through insurance and all the rest of it, is if the insurance company settles and pays you out, they then may well pursue the owner of that horse to kind of, they may well sue the owner of that horse for negligence or what have you.
Especially if they haven't revealed that the horse might be dangerous, or if it's behaved badly with another farrier.
Exactly that. So it's kind of, it's a little tricky, a little bit fraught, because I mean, the horse world is quite a small world, and if you don't want to be sort of getting into litigation, unnecessarily. I mean, probably the way the world is moving, it's going that way anyway. Probably.
Do you? I mean, it's interesting. One of the questions that was asked was, do you carry out a risk assessment and do you provide a term of business agreement? I suppose your risk assessment is when you get on the yard and you look at the horse and you ask about its history.
Yeah, you ask about the history, but it's more about your, how experienced you are. I mean, I know, I think it was Beaver that did a survey of vets and what the incidence of injuries with vets, they found out that the first 5 years of a newly qualified vet was when they were most at risk from accidents. And I think probably the same would be with farriers as well. And partly of that is developing that sixth sense, almost having that experience to ascertain what is a risky situation. But then again, does that come down to the training that farriers and vets also receive? I don't know. I mean, I can't remember. It's a long time ago I did my apprenticeship. I can't remember actually being formally taught, how to do a risk assessment or what to look out for. I mean, a lot of what most farriers develop is just purely through experience. And when you get very old like me, you can drive into a yard and you just by the horse's body language, you can ascertain, the ones that are going to be awkward just through just how they appear in the stable, how they're looking over the door, or what have you. You can tell that. And also looking at the sort of the shoeing area. Is it level? Is it clear? Has it got have you got bales of straw piled up? Have you got a wheelbarrow? All the yard pitchforks and what have you, and brooms all lined up in a row. I mean, that's the thing. It's great to have a shoeing area, but a lot of the time, especially livery yards, are like, this is a really handy place to stick all our shavings or what have you. So
I think as a customer, as a client, you've got to look at your yard afresh, what you're saying, because, thinking of our own yard, it's where you tie them up. Is their neighbour, do they like their neighbour? Is there a horse who's going to hang over the door and have a go at the horse while it's being shot? It's those sorts of things that, quite frankly, if you're in your yard every day, and I did one of these with somebody on health and safety, you get blind to what's in your yard. Yeah. And I think it's part of, maybe as farriers, you need to educate your clients, and the clients need to be open to learning what you need to make it safe for everyone.
Yeah. I mean, it's difficult without coming across as moany old grumpy old farrier or what have you. You're trying to do. You're trying to educate your client, because you want to be able to do the best by their horse. I mean, some of my clients call me a bit of a diva, but but I just want to be able. I want to be able to do.
I'm not going to say anything in case my farrier is listening.
And it's not about it's not about the farrier, you're moaning because it's raining, or it's just a bit of mud or what have you on. I mean, sort of middle of November, you call up to a client, they're like, you pull into their yard, you've got an appointment made at say 10 o'clock, and they're like, I'll just go and get the horse in. If you're brought in with a wet, muddy horse, and it's not about us farriers like, we don't want to get our hands wet or muddy. It's the fact that when we are shoeing a horse, I mean, we use our bodies to hold the horse's legs. I mean, it's okay, we're holding the foot through between our knees, but we're also using the top of the upper part of our body to lean against the horse. And part of you need the horse there needs to be a little bit of friction there for you to hold the horse. If you've got a wet, slippery leg that's pulling away from you, or you spend a day leaning up against a wet, muddy rug that just soaks right through your clothing to your naked skin, it's pretty miserable. And you want to be concentrating on the job in hand. You want to be looking at the foot, and that's what you concentrate on trimming it, how you hit the shoe, how you nail it on, how you finish it. You don't want to be thinking about, am I safe here? What's the horse doing? Is he going to pull away from me? And then again, when we're trimming horses' feet, I mean, it's a bit like trying to say like sand or cut through wet wood. It's very, very difficult to do. I mean, our tools are designed for cutting through dry horn. So you can't do the best job when it's wet and muddy. Yeah, it's very you can't do with a rasp. It's very, very difficult. Your rasp clogs up with mud, and it's nigh on impossible trying to trim a wet. Never mind a muddy foot.
And you've got a fairly fine margin of error, because I know you were telling me before that your target is the white line, and that can vary in size, but it's not there's not a lot of margin for error, is there?
No, I mean, if you're looking at, say, small ponies and thoroughbreds, then you may be looking at a white line, which is, say, 2 mil, and may increase up to 4 or 5 mil in, say, a cob, section D, something like that. So when we're looking at nailing a shoe on, I mean, when we're fitting a shoe, we're fitting the shoe to the foot, maybe the perimeter of the foot, depending on the conformation of the horse. But when we're looking at nailing the shoe on, ideally we're looking at placing those nails through the white line, because the white line is a flexible junction between the sole and the hoof wall. If we're placing our nails within the white line, then chances are that we're going to be nailing into sensitive tissue, which is going to, at best, you're going to have a lame horse. It may develop an abscess. It may need to be off work for some time whilst that abscess clears. If we're nailing into the hoof wall, because the hoof wall isn't as flexible as the white line, then you're going to may encounter premature shoe loss, because the hoof wall, it tends to when you drive a nail in, it tends to split, whereas opposed to driving a nail into the white line, you've got more flexibility there, and that's the strongest place to drive your nails. So it's a very thin. It is a thin margin of error, and if you bring in other variables into that, for example, I have a few clients that they worry about their horse not eating, so it might have been brought in from a field where it's been eating grass, or it may have been brought in from out of the stable where it's been eating hay, and it's like, the horse can, they need to give the hay net to the horse, just by its very means. You've got a horse that's like trying to pull hay out of a hay net, and obviously it's using its head and neck to pull that hay out. It's quite annoying that you've got, as the horse is pulling the hay out, the foot's also moving around, and you're trying to trim, you're trying to nail a shoe on. You've got that. It may only be 3 or 4 centimeters that horse's foot is moving around, but you're making the job very, very difficult. And likewise, I have clients that will think, you go down in the morning, it's like, do you mind if I just feed the horse whilst you're shoeing it? And they'll put a feed bowl on the ground for the horse to eat. And trying to pick up a horse's hind foot when it's got its head down it's not a lot of fun. You just the physics, you're dealing with the horses. I mean, the horse is focused on eating, not what you're doing, holding its foot out. So again, they're not ideal circumstances. It just makes the job a little more difficult. Plus the other thing, farriers don't like you get hay down your neck, down the back of your trousers. It gets into most irritating places. It's like with the licks. I mean, I don't mind. The licks are a great idea, but you get like thick treacly molasses dribbling down your neck or down your ear. That's not a lot of fun either. And then every horse you go to later in the day, they're thinking, man, this farrier smells and tastes good, and you just get licked to death the rest of the day. So they've got their. I'm not saying never feed your horse or what have you. I've got some of my customers, if it distracts the horse, then I'd rather get showered in hay and feed if it helps the horse stand still. But ideally, I prefer horses not to be fed.
But I suppose the key of what you're saying is communication is actually telling, for the farriers to tell their clients. And I suppose when you're more experienced and older, then you feel more confident to tell clients what you would prefer. But, or how many of your clients would expect, just say, oh, well, the horse is in the field, can you fetch it yourself?
I used to do that. But since I had when I lost my finger, it's not worth the risk. And it's also the horse. it's a massive responsibility to have on your shoulders by shoeing on your own. If you have an accident, you're incapacitated, you're knocked out or what have you. You could be lying there for hours. And likewise, if the horse should, heaven forbid, have an accident during the shoeing process, then you're responsible for that animal. I remember years ago I had a client's horse. The client wasn't present. It was on a livery yard, and the horse I was shoeing it pulled back, broke the string, and it just lightly nicked its leg on a wheelbarrow that was probably about 15 feet behind it. It just went into reverse and it nicked its leg. And I told the client what had happened. I never got asked back to shoe that horse again because the horse had sustained an injury whilst it was being shod. I'm sure if the client was there at the time and had seen her horse reversing at 30 miles an hour into a wheelbarrow, then she might have had a slightly better outlook on what had happened.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's being safe, and it's keeping your client in the loop about what's happening, what can go wrong, and how to make it as safe a procedure as you possibly can. I mean, you're doing half a ton of animal. You're not going to be able to eliminate every risk.
No, and if you can't pick your horse's feet up, then you shouldn't expect your farrier to.
Well, yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, there's lots to be said about that. But I mean, even like picking out horses' feet doesn't seem to happen like it used to.
No, you're right. Actually, I'm a bit guilty of it myself.
Yeah, but it may. I mean, I have clients. You go and shoe the horses first thing in the morning, and they got a load of mud and stones from the night before. So,
no, we don't do that. So I think the key message seems to be listen to your farrier and prepare your horse, and just be aware that some things around your horse are going to influence its behaviour, and if you're not prepared to put yourself in your farrier's position, then you shouldn't expect your farrier to.
Yeah, and I like to think with the campaign that the BFBA have been involved with, it's just educating horse owners, because I mean, primarily we want to keep the horse safe, and it needs to be shod in a safe environment, and everybody wants their horse to be shod to the highest standard it possibly can be. And if we can remove dangerous things like shoeing in trying to shoe or trim horses in fields, or when the horses are wet, or if it's raining or what have you, then it'll make the experience far more enjoyable for everybody.
And equally as important, not only are we keeping our horses safe, but we're keeping our farriers safe, because we want you to come back and shoe our horses.
Yeah.
I know Beaver ran a really good campaign a few years ago, Don't Kill Your Vet. So I think we should be setting another one up, which is Don't Injure Your Farrier.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're dealing with, I mean, obviously vets, and they're doing nerve blocks and things like that, but I mean, which is dangerous. But I mean, with farriers, we're dealing with the business end. The way we position ourselves to shoe a horse. Yeah, some of the times, our faces are literally inches away from the back feet of a horse. Kick with the hind limb was it's like over 2 to 5% of those injuries were sustained by kick from the hind limb. So,
and having been at the sharp end of one of those, and I'm not a farrier, I really know what that's like. So, Mark, on that cheery note, I think the key take-home message is watch out for the campaign when the BFBA starts it up in the autumn. Look out for the education, and if you know how your horse should be prepared for a farrier, then tell your friends as well, to make certain that everybody understands and value your farrier, because you do a good job and we couldn't do without you.
Thank you. Much appreciated. Thanks for inviting me to participate in this, Claire. Thank you.
No, really good to have you, Mark. I think it's been really useful, and have a good rest of the summer. And let's hope we get another medal in the next couple of days.
Yeah, let's hope so. And I hope I didn't come across as being too moany and miserable.
As if a farrier could. Thank you very much, Mark.
No. All right.